Hi, my name is Matthew Mercer. I'm a senior graduate recruiter at Shoosmiths, and I'm here to answer your questions about training contracts and applications today. We've had a number of questions in from yourselves already, and I'm going to go through these now, answer the questions as best as I can, and sort of talk through them in a bit more detail. Just to give you a bit of background on myself, I've been working in recruitment for 5 years, currently a graduate recruiter excuse me, in Shoosmiths, and I look after excuse me, all of the graduate recruitment here, and covering application forms, vacation schemes, so on and so forth. So the first question that we had was, what are the chances of a candidate securing a training contract with a 2-1 but a fail in one subject because of mitigating circumstances? Will a year-long work experience sort of overcome the fail? So most firms have a policy surrounding mitigating circumstances, and it's exactly the same here at Shoosmiths. Essentially, it comes down to the specifics of what your mitigating circumstances are, and you will be asked to give a reason as to what those mitigating circumstances are. And certainly if you are giving a valid reason, this will not adversely impact your chances in your application. On the sort of second point around the year-long work experience, I would encourage all of you to get as much experience as possible. This adds an incredible amount of value to your applications, and also in terms of gives you another aspect for you to sort of apply in your applications. So you can use that to answer competency-based questions in your application form. You can talk about it in your assessment centre. So whether it's through a year-long placement scheme, depends if those of you have got a sandwich year course or not, or whether it's work experience gained over the summer, or through a vacation scheme for a week, for example, I would encourage you to get as much work experience as you can, as it will add a significant amount of value to your projects and to your applications, and make you come across as much more credible in face-to-face interviews as well. So the second question we had through was, in a number of applications you were asked to sell the firm to a potential client in a couple of hundred words. Would you recommend picking just one practice area or industry, or would you discuss the firm as a whole? Now, one of my kind of top tips when I'm speaking to prospective trainee solicitors is that one of the core questions you should be asking yourself is, why is the employer looking why are they asking this question? And I think in this instance, unless the question is specified in a scenario where you're pitching to a specific client in an industry, or you're applying to a firm that specifies one area of law, so it may be a specialist firm that only specialises in, say, sports law, for example, my advice would be to discuss the firm as a whole. And really, this question, the firm wants to know what you understand about them and how much research and detail you have gone into to sort of talk about, I guess, sort of the culture of the firm, the practice of the firms as well, and what wider reading that you've done. So what I would recommend is that you emphasise the unique selling points of the firm, i.e. what makes them different to their competitors. So is it the culture? Is it about the awards they've won? Is it the amount of deals that they've achieved? Is it their sort of specific client focus? Really sort of do your research into that, and you can do that through obviously looking at the firm's website, but go beyond that, look at their social media, see if you can talk to somebody, message one of their employees on LinkedIn and have a conversation with them to see if they'd be free to have a coffee with you in free, or answer any questions that you've got. And certainly, even using an example here at Shoosmiths, you see a lot more value for those people that have managed to engage with a current or ex-employee of Shoosmiths and find out more about what it's like working for the firm in their answering of their questions, as opposed to someone that has memorized all of the key facts and figures on the website, and is just reciting those one after the other. So really do your research in this, tailor your application to the firm in your answer. You should always be linking your answers back to the culture and the nature of the firm in your answers as well. Again, it's showing you're tailoring it rather than having a copy and paste on all of your applications as well. And I'll come on to that a bit later about how I'd recommend you would approach your application forms. So the third question sort of links back with this. The same goes when an application form asks who the firm's main competitors are and how the firm is different. For example, if you wanted to join, they've given an example here, Shearman Sterling, due to their reputation as a leading M&A firm, would you state other M&A firms as their competition, or would you speak more generally about other smaller firms? And this is a very good question. I think here I would refer back to my answer in the previous question about demonstrating your knowledge about the USPs of the firm. However, I'd certainly encourage you to provide specific examples within that. So you may start talking more generally about the unique selling points of the firm, who their general competitors are, but by going into specific details about the practice area, in this case mergers and acquisitions in the practice area there, this shows a granular level of detailed knowledge in your research and adds more about what attracted you to the firm in the first place. And obviously with this individual, mergers and acquisitions is the sort of key thing that brought them into that. So really talking about that in detail shows your level of interest, shows your research. So I would certainly encourage that. Obviously, I'd take it in the context of how many sort of words, what your word count is, what's the development around that. So in the example you could give, it'd be prudent to infer, talk about the sort of firm's general competitors, but then you may go on to say something like, for example, as S&S are a reputable M&A firm in their field, their more recent competitor in this area is X blank firm LLP, who did the second largest amount of deals in the M&A market in 2016. Again, that shows your research specifically with the practice, and it may help tailor your answer and go to that level of detail that other applications might not have done so. So the next question asks, how early or late should an applicant submit their applications? This doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you submit your application right at the start of when they open their application process or right at the end. How it typically works, and again, using my own firm as an example, we collate all of the applications over a period of a number of weeks. And then we will mark those and grade those over a sort of chunk of 2 weeks, for example, after the deadline has passed. So whenever you submit your application, it doesn't matter. And also with a lot of the what we call ATS or applicant tracking systems that are used to log all of the applications and the forms and so forth, the applications don't tend to be ranked by the application date. It tends to be ranked on things like academic scoring or sort of location, for example. So the time when you apply does not matter. What I would advise, however, is give yourself plenty of time to complete the application forms, and I would suggest having a few days for one application. Now that may seem quite a lot, and obviously for a lot of you, you've got your studies and your exams and other things going on at the same time, but what I would say is that it means that you have time to really read through all of the questions, understand what the firm's asking for here, and go and do your research as well, specifically so that you can tailor your answers to that firm in particular. And also I tend to find it helps as well that if you say complete a couple of questions one day, have a gap of 2 or 3 days, and then come back to it, you're approaching it with a fresh pair of eyes, and it's sort of, you may have spotted some error, or you may have thought of or come across a new article, for example, that's been released on the firm's newsfeed that you think is very pertinent to your answer. So again, this is all building towards it. Obviously, it goes without saying, I'm sure you guys aren't of the same opinion here, but don't leave your application to the last minute, i.e. midnight before closing. It obviously puts a lot of stress on you. It means that your application will be rushed, and you may not, it's unlikely that you'll have the time to spell check, do grammar checks, things like that. Silly little mistakes may creep through, which will harm your chances of being selected for an assessment centre. So the next question asks, for one firm, I met the UCAS requirements but fell short of the IB point requirement, intellectual baccalaureate. Would you still recommend applying for the firm? So what a lot of you will see is most firms will tend to list their requirements, academic requirements, on their websites for applying for a training contract. So they may say, for example, you need for example, ABB for A-level, 5 Scottish Highs within the A and B band, or 35 from the 6 chosen subjects of the International Baccalaureate. I'm just using a random example here. Obviously, if you don't meet those criteria, you need to think about what else you can bring to the firm. If you're still thinking about applying, how a lot of the ATS systems, the applicant tracking systems I talked about earlier, they will automatically score you based on your academic grading, and obviously you then get scored on your answers to the competency-based questions, other things as well like psychometric testing, depending on the firms that you're applying for. So if you don't meet the academic requirements, however, you may have been out of school for some time and built up work experience outside of that you feel adds value, I would still suggest applying. However, if you are a sort of recent graduate and you don't have much work experience to your name, I would advise against it. It's very unlikely that you'll be able to secure a training contract if you don't meet those requirements. Just a point on the nature of the wording of this question. It did throw me off slightly when I was reading through it last night. Typically, UCAS and the International Baccalaureates are on a par with each other. So International Baccalaureates are basically rewarded. It's an education area for about sort of 254 countries in the world, but they're usually viewed on a par with UCAS. So I don't know whether the person who asked this question was referring to I met the UCAS requirements but I didn't get a 2-1 in my degree, or whether they misread what the firm was asking for. Sometimes they'll list it in a way that makes you think that I need to have all of the qualifications, but if you meet the UCAS requirements, then you'll be absolutely fine, provided you meet the degree requirements as well. Don't worry about you don't need to have an IB as well. But just a point on that, I'm not sure quite what the question was about there. So the next question is, what is the most common mistake that you see on your application form? So I've actually listed a couple here. One of them is spelling and grammatical errors. As you'd expect, good lawyers need to have strong attention to detail, produce a high quality of legal documentation, and have accurate correspondence. Essentially, so the firms are looking at your application form for a demonstration of that. So it won't look favourably upon you if there are multiple errors on your application form. And in some instances, some firms will have say 3 strikes and you're out policy. So if there are 3 spelling mistakes or grammatical mistakes, your application will instantly be declined or unsuccessful, which is actually a policy that Shoosmiths has itself. So it's really important that you check, triple check, double check, triple check your application form for any of those errors. Get someone else to read over it as well, or a third party to look through it for you. Because a fresh pair of eyes will help spot any grammatical or spelling errors as well. The second error that I see a lot of issues with is too short an answers. So when I scroll down through an application form and I see that the candidate's only provided 2 to 3 lines where they perhaps have maybe 300 to 500 word limit, I instantly know that there's not enough detail there to have fully answered the question to the best of their ability and to what we're looking for. Typically with a lot of firms, they have scoring grades, usually, for example, 0 to 3, where 0 is don't answer the question, doesn't provide any relevant examples, and 3 is provide excellent examples within a commercial setting, links back to the firm's values and how the experience made them a better lawyer and developed them as a person. So really you need to be providing detailed examples. Try to use a couple of different ones as well. You may find that with some of the firms have applications which have 2 or 3 competency-based questions. I would suggest you use a couple of different examples where possible. Obviously, if you don't have much experience, don't worry too much, but try and use different scenarios within your same job, for example. Excuse me, where possible, try to avoid using purely academic examples. So if a firm, for example, asks you a question about competency-based questions, so it might be something along the lines of timekeeping, don't talk about how you manage to meet your deadlines with your dissertation, because more often than not, we've had hundreds of other applications that have used that very same example. It doesn't really set you apart from the competition, and it doesn't make your application stand out either. So where possible, use work experience, use extracurricular. Maybe you've been part of a sports team like rugby or football, badminton, hockey, whatever, or you've been part of the student council. A lot of people that we have through work at the Citizens Advice Bureau as well, which gives you excellent examples and experience to deal with customers in real time and face-to-face. But use those in your answers to provide fully detailed examples and scenarios, and where you can, link your answer back to the firm's values. And obviously you can find details of the values on the website, and they'll talk about what makes them different, and they'll talk about the culture. I would strongly encourage you link that back in your answers. How does their culture resonate with you as an individual, and can you give examples of where you've demonstrated those values, for example, whether it's being a team player, taking the initiative, for example. Because again, that will build on it. And also do talk about what you learned from the experience as well. It really demonstrates sort of self-reflection in an applicant and how they developed. And even if, for example, if you had a competency-based question asking you about when you've had to deal with a difficult customer or client, and you've had to provide an example, but actually you weren't able to resolve it, don't worry about it, because you can go on to talk about, well, even though it wasn't resolved or the customer's still unhappy, I learned that the process should have gone like this, and it helped me grow as an individual, and I think it will help me become a better lawyer as well. So don't be afraid to use examples which you may think actually they don't have a positive conclusion, because it will certainly help you as well. And the final question that we had sent in was, what is the most common mistake you see being made in interviews? And I've put sort of 3 points here really to talk about. So the first is sort of disengagement or lack of preparation. I mean, it goes without saying, do your research in the firm. You can read about how the firm is going to structure their assessment centre. Most firms will usually send you some information about what the format of the day will be, and you may even be assigned some tasks to complete before you actually arrive. So for example, it could be a presentation that you have to deliver. Certainly in the face-to-face interview side, and I interview a lot of graduates on a weekly, monthly basis. I lose count of how many I've interviewed, to be honest with you. It's very telling when someone hasn't done their research, and they may give very general facts about the firm. So they may say to me, "Oh, Shoosmiths is a top 40 national law firm. It's turned over 106 million, etc., etc." But they don't go on to talk about the USPs. They don't go on to talk about, well, I noticed recently that you won award for best debt recovery team in the UK, and Wayne Mannix, who's the head of our recoveries here, achieved this award. Or talk about how the culture resonates with you. So, for example, big diversity sort of policy that really resonates with me for X, Y, Z reasons. So, really do research, because interviewers and skilled interviewers will be able to tell when you haven't done your research, and that demonstrates a lack of interest in the firm as a whole if you haven't taken the time to go and read about them also. The second most common mistake is the sort of academic examples being used again. Again, there's been a lot of instances in the past where I've had people come in and I ask them about, to give me an example, say how they've managed their time or met deadlines when they've had multiple things sit in their desk, and they provide an academic example. So, oh, you know, my second, third year, I had coursework and my dissertation, I had to balance the two out with my busy social life, you know, going out and partying. Again, that's, you know, it's not a bad answer, but the problem is that there's a multitude of other people who've had exactly the same experience. We want to know what makes you stand out. And I mean, to give you some examples of that, and I did interviews for our placement scheme that we have, 12-month placement scheme in Shoosmiths last year, and that one of the candidates who I interviewed stood out because she talked about her YouTube channel and how she gives motivational speeches and how she gives advice to young women and doing their makeup and things like that. And it seems like a bit of a bizarre example, and it may sound like that, but actually it made her stand out. And I see her in the office now daily, and we still have a chuckle about that. And I think her team have joked about being stars on YouTube as well. But it's examples like that. So even if you think the example might have no relevance to law whatsoever, the skills that you demonstrate in that are incredibly transferable, and I think it's important to look through those and think, what makes me stand out as an individual? And you'll talk about a lot of firms, Shoosmiths does it as well. Create a brand you know, what makes you unique, makes you different, and talk about that in the interview as well. I think the final common mistake that I see is body language, and that's something that a lot of people struggle with, and you do subconsciously as well. It's obviously something that you can fix and you can work on. There's some fantastic videos out there. There is a YouTube video out there that's about an hour and a half long, called The Art of Body Language, which talks actually has a lot of experts looking at leaders like Barack Obama, Vladimir Putin, and analyses their sort of televised addresses, their speech patterns about body language. And it's a brilliant watch. I would recommend it if you've got a spare weekend or hour here and there. But there's sort of a few general tips there. You obviously don't want to be hunched over, crossing your arms. It shows you to be very closed off, not actually engaging with your employer. On the flip side of that, you don't want to be too relaxed, sort of kicking back in your chair. You want to be attentive, so you want to be sat up straight. You want to be maintaining eye contact as well, and obviously nodding when the interviewer is talking. And also listening as well, and sort of thinking about it. Nobody will ever penalise you if you have to take a couple of minutes to think about your answer, rather than just babble out something that isn't relevant whatsoever. And it goes without saying, obviously make sure that your attire is there. That is obviously an important thing because of presentation. And again, this links back to how is the firm is looking at, can I trust you to represent my firm in front of a client? Are you well turned out? Are you a good communicator? So you want to be personable, you want to be engaging and confident as well. Obviously have a good handshake as well. You don't want to have what we call a wet kipper in the hands, a sort of floppy handshake. It's nothing worse than that, if I'm honest. And obviously don't be afraid to engage in small talk as well. It's not a secret thing that we're trying to question you on. If I'm walking you up from reception through the lifts into the meeting room and asking about your weekend or so forth, you know, be relaxed. It's not a ploy for me to try and, you know, I'm secretly making mental notes of what you enjoy watching or something like that. And that's really important as well. And I think another point I wanted to make as well was really about the use of social media now. And I think a lot of law firms are doing this more and more. Shoosmiths certainly are on Pinterest, Twitter, Instagram. You can go and engage, and certainly you're doing it now with obviously Facebook Live, which is fantastic. But there's so much content out there, research there, tips there. How do I engage? You know, we've got videos talking with trainees, how they got to where they are, what are their career backgrounds, insight evenings as well. they're running this time of year, work experience as well, wherever you can pick that up. Anything that you can get to get engaged with current trainees or even solicitors and lawyers within a current firm that you're interested in will help you. And it won't just help you from the perspective of bulking out your applications and training contracts, but actually will help you determine what areas of law you're interested in and what you aspire to be in your career as a lawyer. And law is a fantastic career because there's so many different areas to specialise in, and it keeps everybody interested, and it's ever changing as well. And that brings me to my final point, which is make sure you go out there and sign up to newsletters, keep up to date with local trends, because you will find other applications is sort of there, and they will talk about what challenges there are to the legal industry. And you may find more often than not that a lot of firms will have that in their application forms about, what challenges do you think our firm will be facing in the next few years? And that can be anything from the rise of technology, AI, or it could be Brexit, for example. But again, that's showing commercial awareness, and that's a term that you'll hear mentioned a lot in the area, but that's what it refers to, your broader knowledge of the industry and how markets or external factors are impacting law firms and their day-to-day business. Anyway, that's all the questions that have been sent forward. Thank you all for sending those over, and I hope that's been useful. As I said, my name is Matthew Mercer, Senior Graduate Recruiter here at Shoosmiths. But thank you for listening in and tuning in during your lunch break, and I hope you all have a good rest of the week. Thank you very much.